tests of whether Trump has softened America's position on Taiwan for China.
Right. Well, Taiwan and the world will not listen to what Marco Rubio is saying, won't listen to what a trade representative is saying, because David Ignatius, no president has ever kowtowed to a communist Chinese leader the way Donald Trump did in his words and in his interview. There's so many things that Caddy read out. Any one of these would be a lead in a year. I just want to go through them, and I will let you choose sort of a potpourri of horrors that you can choose from, David. We just saw the abandonment of Taiwan there, speaking in a way no American president ever has. And of course, his kowtowing to Xi, the things he said about Xi. Of course, the continued insults towards Ukraine and attacks on NATO, the cancellation of a deployment of troops to who even Donald Trump has said is a good ally, Poland. The abandonment of Germany, sending a message that we're taking troops out of Germany. More threats from Donald Trump with Iran, and less good options for him. You look what's happening with Qatar. They're at a crisis moment. The UAE got attacked, but fortunately, reports no radioactive fallout from that attack. But the president's poll numbers keep collapsing. But the theme here seems to be the embrace of enemies and the abandonment of allies. Talk about all of what you've seen over the past weekend.
Joe, I'd have the same basic organizing theme that what we're seeing around the world is that it's hard to be America's friend and ally, and that it's easier to be a strong and sometimes belligerent adversary like China. There's a lively debate taking on among people I respect about just how to think about President Trump's China trip. Some people, prominent commentators, Fareed Zakaria of CNN is one, Graham Allison, who teaches at the Harvard Kennedy School, is another, who say that this visit produced, because Trump was so deferential, flattering, produced a degree of stability and cooperation in the relationship that's necessary. There's another group, and I would put myself in that camp, that would say, no, this really ratified China's rise, Xi's rise to a position of real parity with the United States, what people call a G2, the two great superpowers, and it also ratified America's decline. Trump came back with very little of what was expected from this trip. He didn't get as many Boeing plane sales even. He didn't get as many agricultural goodies. And he also managed to put Taiwan in play. I don't think it's too much to say that he's capitulated on the Taiwan question. There's still ambiguous language, but Taiwan's in play. It's a negotiating chip. You just hear in his voice that he's getting ready to deal. As you look around the map, the Trump administration's actions in Europe, to me, are incomprehensible. At a time when Europe is threatened in a way it hasn't been for decades by Russian expansionist power. Russians are fighting real sabotage campaigns in Europe right now. And this is the time that Donald Trump decides he's going to reduce American support for Germany. And I think even more disturbing, to pull back these troops from Poland, a frontline state, which is right there on the Russian border, feeling very menaced by Russia. So it's a time when the basic principle that we often talk about on this show, the strength the United States has in having so many strong allies around the world, is, to my mind, being ignored. The debate over China is its biggest issue of our lifetimes, figuring out the right relationship between the United States and China. And this trip was a way station in a very long story. But you'd have to say, at the end of that visit, the scorecard shows Xi getting what he wanted and Trump generally not getting what he wanted. And that should be concerning for people who want a strong America that can deter a rising China rather than simply accede to its power.
Michael Weiss, I certainly respect people on both sides trying to figure out exactly, sort through why the president was so deferential to President Xi. And they can have that debate, but if you just take a couple of steps back, you see a very clear pattern, as David said, the president being terrible to our closest historic allies, the same allies that helped us take down the Soviet Union, and embracing actually people who consider the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. Again, let me just say it again. While the president's saying, I don't know, maybe we don't give Taiwan weapons because that's a lot of money. At the same time he's doing that, he's abandoning Germany, he's abandoning Poland, sending very clear messages to Vladimir Putin, just like he did when he supported Orban in a failing effort. I mean, and Ukraine, this is a crazy thing. Like, the president is going all in with the losing side. It was one thing when they went around lying, and I talked about this repeatedly. They have lied repeatedly for years, saying that Ukraine is about to collapse. They've continued the lying, and we've called out their lying repeatedly, saying, oh, they'll have the Donbass next month. Oh, Russia's about to overrun them. They need it. You've heard the lies. It has been constant. It has been continual. And even now that they know that they're on the losing side, they're upping the ante by abandoning Germany, by abandoning Poland, the country Putin would go to right after Ukraine. And then you have Taiwan hearing this as well. It has been, I suppose, a head-spinning weekend for American allies, except for the fact they've seen all too much of this over the past decade from Donald Trump.
I spent the weekend talking to Polish government officials, Joe, and they were absolutely flabbergasted by this decision. You know, they were making a concerted play, a lobbying effort, if you like, to try and get those 5,000 troops that we're pulling out of Germany onto Polish soil. And then it turns out these 4,000 troops that were meant to be rotated in are now canceled. You know, the Poles make a big deal about trying to cater to what Bridge Colby, the head of policy planning at DoD, calls NATO 3.0. Strong, stalwart allies that not only do their fair share, but go above and beyond, right? Poland is approaching 5% spending on GDP. It's going to become one of the most militarized countries in Europe. It has secure borders. It ticks all the boxes that MAGA pretends to want to care about with respect to the transatlantic relationship. And the best part, according to the Poles, is they pay for the infrastructure of hosting U.S. troops, which is something not even Germany does, right? Fuel costs for American garrisons in Poland, they pay 50% of. So they're actually footing the bill for this. They cannot understand for the life of them why the United States would want to pull troops away when everyone in Europe is preparing for the next confrontation with Russia, right? I mean, you talk about Ukraine over the weekend, the biggest drone bombardment of Moscow, I think, in a year's time. You know, we keep hearing that Zelensky has no cards. The Ukrainians are faded. It's inevitable. They're going to lose Donbass. They're going to lose this war. Tulsi Gabbard goes on about how Russia has the upper hand. What did this demonstrate over the weekend? It demonstrated that there, but for the grace of Volodymyr Zelensky, Putin's big parade, his Victory Day parade in Red Square, was allowed to take place. This is what the Ukrainians can now do. And these drones that they're using are domestically sourced. They're domestically manufactured at scale, which also highlights or telegraphs to the West they are the center of gravity for all military technological innovation. We are at a state now, and I keep telling you this on the show because it's very important, I think. We need Ukraine more than they need us. Right? We share intelligence with them for the purposes of striking Russian energy infrastructure, military targets, but they share intelligence back with us. You know, they recruit Russian assets. They've been doing this since 2014. They speak the language fluently. They have a massive penetration inside Russian society and inside all levers of or all elements of the Russian state. We're going to need them. They're already a de facto NATO ally. You know, we just don't realize it yet, or some of us in the U.S. government don't realize it yet.
Yeah, I will say, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Ukraine has the best fighting force in all of Europe. David Petraeus says, you want to see the future of warfare? It's happening right now in Ukraine. Had the Secretary of Army say the same thing. They're doing extraordinary things in Ukraine, and still Donald Trump continues to do everything he can by abandoning our allies in Germany, abandoning our allies in Poland, constantly fighting NATO, abandoning the Ukrainians, continually abandoning the Ukrainians, anything to provide aid and comfort to Vladimir Putin, and none of it working. You know, this weekend, I was thinking, and we often see this as people get older, Jonathan Lemire. I read your article, and I think you're so right. Any suggestion that Donald Trump has dementia or is losing mind, whatever, it's ridiculous. I said the same thing about Joe Biden. Went and talked to him for 3 hours, and yes, Biden was moving very slow, very stiff. Donald Trump may be slowing down, but I think what we're really seeing here, and what I really pulled from your article, is that for the president who's about to turn 80 this next month, for a president who has always been erratic, as he turns 80, we are seeing some diminished capacities with anybody who would turn 80. But that erraticism, we are seeing it exaggerated. And I wonder if that's what we see playing out, where he's just not just saying the quiet part out loud, he's screaming it. He wants to abandon our Polish allies. He wants to abandon Ukraine as he continues to do. He wants to abandon our German allies. He wants to do everything he can do to help Vladimir Putin. Because make no mistake of it, all the people that have been going around yelling, Russia hoax, Russia hoax, Russia hoax, and will be triggered by this because of their own unique version of Trump derangement syndrome. What you actually have is a president doing everything that Vladimir Putin would want him to do. Just ask anybody that's been in this field, that's been in for Vladimir Putin couldn't call these shots any better himself. And so whatever draws him to Vladimir Putin, whatever drew him to Putin in his 70s, it seems to be even more exaggerated now as he turns 80.
Yeah, we can dig into my piece as the morning goes on. But one thing that really struck me is that there was so much conversation about Joe Biden aging, in part because Joe Biden so visibly changed. He got quieter. He got sort of smaller. It seemed like he was frailer. And while Donald Trump, you know, he still physically sort of looks the same. Yes, there are the bruises on his hands, and yes, he falls asleep frequently now in the Oval Office. But he's a big person. He's a big presence, and he's loud. And that has allowed him to skate past accusations that he might be, in fact, aging or declining. But what's really here, and people I've talked to suggest that as he has aged, he has even less and less of a filter. Now, let's be clear. Donald Trump has never been one for self-censoring, but he is someone who now is more purely himself as he ages. It's disinhibition. There's whatever pops in his head, he says, and he also relies more and more, as you just said, Joe, falls back on these instincts, one of them being reflexively sort of, deference to strongmen, whether that is Xi Jinping in China. We saw that on vivid display last week, and certainly for a decade or more, what we have seen with Vladimir Putin. And there really is no other reason for this. As Michael just laid out, and as David has laid out, as you and I talk about on the show on a near daily basis, Ukraine's made real strides in this war. They, in fact, have so many of the cards, and yet they're still in the White House, from Trump himself and in his top officials, this sort of reflexive, Russia's going to win this, when frankly, all evidence points to the other direction.
And I must say that Michael has been saying it, I've been saying it, Ann Applebaum has been saying it. That's been a lie that they've been carrying for a year now. And make no mistake, right now, if you want to know where the Ukrainians are, they're not just on the front lines, they're all across the Gulf region. Because guess what? Everybody is asking them about the future of warfare and how they defend themselves against the war that Donald Trump started with Iran. Still at our morning show. First of all, we're going to get Sam Stein's insights on all of this, even though this last segment may have been Sam's greatest yet. But coming up, new reporting on Cuba, recently acquiring hundreds of military drones, asymmetric warfare, with leaders there discussing plans to attack U.S. targets. Mark Caputo of Axios joins us straight ahead, and we'll get David Ignatius' insights as well. Plus, there are new ethics questions concerning Donald Trump's massive number of recent stock trades and the timing of those trades? We're going to dig into that. And as we go to break, a quick look at the traveler's forecast this morning from AccuWeather's Bernie Rayno. Bernie, is spring here for good? Because summer's just around the corner.
Joe, we have a severe weather outbreak late today. Cities like Des Moines, Kansas City, Wichita, Kansas, strong thunderstorm in Chicago this morning. AccuWeather says beautiful day in Boston, warm. It feels like August. New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., warm and humid across the southeast. A few spotty thunderstorms. Some strong thunderstorms late today in Oklahoma City.
So, David Ignatius, I would love to get your take on everything we were talking about. And again, let me just say, and I've talked to John, just like I've talked to everybody about my meetings with Donald Trump, or when I've talked to Donald Trump. I haven't in a couple of months, but it was just like, it was a lot like the Biden talk I heard. Oh, Biden's lost his mind. He's, ambling around. And yeah, Biden was slow and awkward and stiff and quiet, but I sat there and talked to him for 3 hours, very detailed on foreign policy. With Donald Trump, there was none of that, but there was the same, as Jonathan says, the same very vigorous Donald Trump, whose very presence fills up a room. So it is a very different situation with, I think, very different threats. But right now, the threat is being felt by our allies, whether it's Taiwan or what's happened in Ukraine. I will say we can't get clarity, even though there are reports that the $400 million that was authorized in the 26 Congressional Authorization, Defense Authorization Act. I don't know if Ukraine has gotten that yet. We haven't gotten any signals from them that they have. But even that, even congressional funding becomes a battle on whether Pete Hegseth's Pentagon will release money that Congress has authorized to Ukraine.
Joe, what I'm seeing is that Ukraine in particular, but I think this is true for other countries in Europe, is beginning to realize that it simply can't depend on American aid promised in the pipeline, whatever you wanted to say about it, that they have to begin planning to defend themselves. And we're seeing that. The extraordinary Ukrainian drone strike over the weekend, 650 Ukrainian drones flying toward Moscow and other targets, video footage of refineries in flames in Russia. This is from a country that, when you talk to Trump's negotiating team, they say they're down and out, they're going to be finished in 6 months. Doesn't look like it to me. And so Ukraine and others, I think, are deciding we have to do this ourselves. Talking to Germans, there's a recognition we have to arm ourselves. Americans are taking troops out of Germany. The old paradigm is really broken now. So you're going to see Germany, a country, rearm, even begin to think about, does it need nuclear weapons? Who would have imagined that Germany would be having that debate? But that's, again, a result of Trump. Imagine if you're the Japanese prime minister watching this Trump visit to Beijing. I mean, she is way out there exposed in defying President Xi Jinping, and she now feels that she's been basically cut off. So what did the Japanese do to protect their security? So these are, Joe, questions around the world in terms of what you were specifically asking. What about the Ukraine aid? It's a measure of Washington these days. It's almost impossible, at least for me, to find out exactly where that package is when I ask, because I get so many different answers.
So, Michael Watts, put the same question to you, if we have any clarity as to that aid. But more than that, talk to us about how Ukraine's sort of position has changed, where over this last year or so, a little bit less reliant on the United States.
Well, The Economist just did an analysis saying that as many as 500,000 Russian soldiers are dead, 1.5 million are wounded. That's about 2 to 3% of Russia's pre-war population taken off the chessboard, right? This was a war that was meant to be 2 weeks at the most. Russian columns at the Polish border, after they take Kyiv in 3 days. You now have a situation where Ukraine is clawing back territory on the battlefield for the first time since 2023. I think it's like 189 square kilometers. Beyond that, the ability of Ukraine to project its power well beyond its borders. They played a role in Mali in kicking Russian forces out of that country. I mentioned before, they played a minimal role in Syria, giving drone advice and aid to Syrian rebels when they wanted to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. They've done the same thing in Sudan against the Wagner Group. What did they do in the Middle East? This is one of the most unsung stories, I think, of the last several weeks. You know, Iranian Shahid drones, which basically were pioneered in the war in Ukraine, right? They were provided to Russia. Russia has wreaked havoc and terror on Ukrainian cities using these things. They're about $20,000 a pop. Iranian Shahid drones hit a U.S. military installation in Kuwait, killed 6 American servicemen. Then they took out an AWACS command and control aircraft, hard to replace, something like over $1 billion.
In